Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the RDX Sports Podcast. I'm Simon Head, and what a night of fights we just had this past weekend. UFC 319 in Chicago, delivered in a major way. We had a great night of fights. We knew leading in, we previewed it on last week's edition of the show. This main card was absolute dynamite from top to tail, and every single fight produced a headline. Every single fight produced a storyline and something to really latch onto moving forward into the last part of 2025. So let's run down these results and just go over the big talking points. These are our Saturday night takeaways from UFC 319. All right, where else do we start but with the main event? Khamzat Chimaev challenging Dricus Du Plessis for the undisputed middleweight championship of the world. Hands up, full disclosure, complete mea culpa on my part. I thought Dricus Du Plessis was going to win this fight. I really did. I thought that his toughness, his size and his strength would be enough to fend off Khamzat Chimaev sufficiently through the first couple of rounds, maybe start to frustrate Chimaev, maybe start to drain that gas tank of his a little bit, and then Du Plessis would come on strong in the second half of the fight and either win by decision or maybe even win by late stoppage. That was how I saw this fight panning out. And looking online, there were a lot of people who, while maybe not hitching their wagon to that theory entirely, certainly suggested that that was a very strong possibility that Du Plessis will be strong enough to get through the early part of the fight and then really start to take over as the fight headed into the middle rounds and then into the championship rounds. Well, the fight did go the full 5-minute distance. Sorry, 5-minute round distance. But it was all one-way traffic. Khamzat Chimaev, utterly dominant in his wrestling. And this is mixed martial arts. You need to be good at everything. But sometimes when you get in there with a specialist, when you get in there with someone who they have one skill that is just that much higher than everybody else, they become incredibly difficult to deal with. Dricus Du Plessis, super well-rounded. He gets taken down, but he's able to get back up. We've seen that in fights in the past. His stand-up is solid. He's as tough as a $2 steak. But against Khamzat Chimaev, while he didn't really get hurt in the fight, he got completely smothered. I think that's the best word to use to describe it. He got smothered. Khamzat Chimaev, I think even Du Plessis after the fight said that Chimaev was like a blanket and he just could not get him off. And that was what it looked like. Chimaev was able to get the takedown. He's relentless. His shot is one of the best in MMA, and he shoots from a long way out, but he still manages to get there. He covers the ground so quickly. But once he initiates contact, once he gets his hands on you, he's all over you like a cheap suit, and he does not let go. And he's just relentless. And that relentlessness got Dricus Du Plessis to the canvas pretty much in the opening 30 to 45 seconds of every single round. And once the fight hit the mat, Du Plessis, other than maybe in the last round, he wasn't able to get up. And that meant that what we saw as a spectacle wasn't the greatest. It was a lot of one man basically lying on top of another man, looking to advance position, yes, but also being very defensively responsible while in an offensive position. I think there've been a few critics out there saying that Chimaev could and should have really pushed for the finish harder than he did. Watching the fight, I can understand that point of view. What I would also say is that Du Plessis, while he didn't have an answer to Khamzat Chimaev's takedowns, did really impressively to stay out of trouble, or to stay out of major trouble on the mat. 5 rounds of that sort of pressure on your back with someone like Chimaev on top of you is like it's unfathomable, really. And for someone like Du Plessis to stay on point defensively enough to make sure that he didn't get submitted, that he didn't open himself up to get TKO'd. He did suit. I know he lost every round on the scorecards, and one of those was a 10-8 round. All the scorecards, by the way, read 50-44, with one round being given as a 10-8. I'll talk about that in a sec. But for Du Plessis, under that amount of duress over 5 rounds against someone like Chimaev, to come out of that without being finished, That's a major, major feather in the cap for him. I know he lost the fight. I know he lost the title. I know he lost every round. So this sounds a bit crazy, but for Dricus Du Plessis to have done that, I was actually super impressed. I was super impressed because he was totally dominated on the ground. Totally dominated. It was a mismatch. Yet defensively, he really showed up and showed just how good and how gritty and how tough and how unbreakable his spirit is in that fight. And even between rounds, like, he was basically saying, yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay. The only thing that he couldn't stop was the takedown. If you can stop the takedown, that fight looks very different, and I think it would be an absolute thriller. But the fact that he couldn't stop the takedown meant that the fight, quote unquote, never really got started. It was just takedown, hold him down, controlling position, trying to move to a submission position, trying to land a little bit of offense with the ground strike. Unbelievable punch stats, over 500 punches landed. Not many of them significant, though, and I think that gives you a nod to the effectiveness of Du Plessis' defense, making sure that he didn't allow himself to be in a position where Chimaev could really posture up and land the heavy stuff. But talking about Chimaev, utterly, utterly dominant on the ground. And I don't think there are many other, or maybe even any other, ranked UFC middleweights who would have lasted all 5 rounds under those circumstances. So, and Chimaev afterwards said how tough Du Plessis was. So, you know, that really was a nod to the outgoing champion. Now we have Khamzat Chimaev as the champion. Who's going to be next for him? You've got Caio Borralho, heavy-handed striker with decent grappling. You've got Fluffy Hernandez, loves to fight in a phone booth, much like Chimaev does, has excellent grappling skills. That stylistically is the one that interests me the most, although I think Chimaev might have the size on him and maybe the strength on him, but we will see. The one thing you will see from Fernandez is he'll be dangerous off his back in a way that Du Plessis maybe wasn't. We've also got Nasser Imavov, who probably is the most well-rounded of all the contenders at the top of the division. He's big, he's strong, he hits hard, he's got decent grappling. But the question with all of these guys is twofold. Number one, can you stop or limit the takedown from Khamzat Chimaev? And number two, if and when you do get taken down, what are you going to do? Are you able to fight your way back up? Can you somehow find an answer to Chimaev on the ground? Do you have something off your back that is going to make Chimaev either want to disengage or be a little less open in his attack in that the fight then can get stood up? So these are the questions, and I know like Gilbert Burns and Kamaru Usman, those two performances against Chimaev really show you how good those two guys are in that particular realm in two different ways. Usman's takedown defense is outstanding. He was able to fend off a fair amount of takedowns against Chimaev and probably gave Chimaev his toughest fight in the UFC. Imagine him with a full training camp to prepare to fight a middleweight. Maybe he's looking at that fight thinking, do you know what? You know, I've had a good run at welterweight. I was champion for a while. We've just seen Michael Venom Page move up to middleweight, have a couple of fights and look pretty good. I was a welterweight champion of the world. I got brilliant wrestling. I got heavy hands. Maybe I should bulk up just a little bit and move up to 185 pounds. I would love to see that, because if he does, he's immediately a top 10, top 5 contender. And given how he performed against Chimaev, he's probably an instant title contender. So maybe we put Usman in there at 185. You give him someone in the top 5, and then boom, you stick him in a title fight. We now have a bit of a championship picture at the top of the middleweight division. It was looking a bit flat maybe 18 months ago. Now we've got a fresh crop of contenders. So if Usman does join the division, I think he needs a win just to get in there. But once he's got that win, then that is a fight that could very, very easily be made and very, very easily be sold, because I think he could be the guy to really push Chimaev. With a word to Gilbert Burns maybe doesn't have the wrestling, doesn't necessarily have the takedown defense, but once the fight is on the mat, his jiu-jitsu is as good as anybody in the UFC, former jiu-jitsu world champion, very active guard, very dangerous off his back. And we saw that in the Chimaev fight. And that led to the fight being spent for a reasonable amount, particularly late on, in the stand-up. And Burns will throw down with anybody. Even though he was undersized compared to Chimaev, he was in there and was throwing heavy stuff. And he put on a great performance as well. And was the guy with the momentum as the fight came to a close. So they're two guys with two skill sets that can at least offer some sort of resistance to Khamzat Chimaev, who has that at 185 pounds. Very interesting to see who the UFC booking with. Chimaev said he'd love to fight in Abu Dhabi, which is not that far down the road. I would love to see that. Chimaev's performances and appearances in the UFC have been pretty sporadic. It would be great to get him back in regular rotation. He's a champion now. He's going to be expected to defend his belt minimum twice a year. Hopefully we can get 3 fights a year out of him. We've got 1 championship fight out of him already. Great performance. He'll need a bit of time to rest and recoup. Then let's get him back. Get him on the Abu Dhabi card. Let's do it. And who would you put him in against? If I was looking right now, Nasruddin Imavov is probably the natural pick, right? He's I think, #1 contender right now. Stylistically, Fluffy Hernandez, and he's the one who's come off the most impressive performance. That win over Roman Dolidze was a real statement. If you remember when Chimaev just ragdolled Li Jingliang and all sort of carried him across the cage and started talking to Dana White, there were kind of shades of that a little bit in Fluffy Hernandez in the way that he dragged Roman Dolidze across the cage in sort of big brother fashion. So that was super, super impressive from him. Stylistically, that would be the fight I'd be most interested to see right now. As for Dricus Du Plessis, I think he needs to take some time. He's been champion. He's been on a pretty heavy schedule. You know, he's had big fights, lots of pressure. He's been in there and he's been completely outmatched in one department of MMA. The other parts were rendered obsolete because he couldn't match him in the wrestling and he couldn't get back to his feet once he got taken down. So if I was Dricus, I'd take 6 months off and just work solidly on that one area of the game that he needs, because he knows against almost everybody else in the division, he already has the game to win. That's why he's been champion of the world. Now he's got to find that missing piece of the jigsaw to make to nullify Khamzat Chimaev's biggest weapon, which is his wrestling and his top control. If he can spend, even if he takes a year off, but takes 6 months minimum, just get in the gym, get in the workshop, away from all the watching eyes, and just work solidly on what he needs to do to combat Khamzat Chimaev in that situation. Then come back. He might even get an instant rematch once he comes back. I don't know. Maybe he needs to win one, but we know that he can beat almost anybody in that division, so that's no biggie. He can come back, he can fight a top contender, he can win that fight. And then, if Chimaev is still there, then he's got the rematch with Khamzat Chimaev. But middleweight is looking very interesting right now. It's fresh, it's new. We have new contenders, we have a new champion. And who knows, we might have an old champion from another division thinking about making the jump up as well. Come on, Kamaru, let's see you at 185. I think you could be a lot of fun at 185 pounds. Let's get the Nigerian Nightmare in the mix in the middleweight title picture. But that's middleweight, and that was the main event at UFC 319. Khamzat Chimaev, utterly dominant, 50-44s across the board against Dricus Du Plessis. And I wanted to mention the scoring. A lot of people were saying, oh, that's a 10-8 round here, it's a 10-8 round there. It isn't. It isn't. It's damage, duration, and dominance, right? You need all 3 of those Ds in order to get a 10-8. A lot of those rounds had 2. A lot of them had duration and dominance. They did not have damage. And that was probably the thing that was missing from Khamzat Chimaev's game, due in large part to Du Plessis defending as well as he did. Chimaev wasn't able to really, for all of his dominance on top, was not able to really impose any kind of damage on Du Plessis. There are a couple of moments where he landed a few heavy shots, and that was in the round where he got the 10-8. But largely, it was a lot of control time. He's advancing, he's looking for openings, but maybe the aggressiveness wasn't as much as you would normally expect from Chimaev. Again, we can put that down in at least some part to Du Plessis defending, but I felt a little bit like Chimaev could have pushed a little bit more. Maybe there's also a lot of respect for what Du Plessis might have been able to do. So I think Chimaev knew that the route to victory was to keep the fight on the floor and that was his primary aim. But yeah, hard to fault the man's performance where he pitches a shutout in a title fight, probably the most dominant title fight performance from a challenger I've seen in a long time. I'm trying to think back, like probably one of the best performances I've seen from challengers in title fights. I think TJ Dillashaw put on an incredible performance. Was it Helen Barrow he beat? Unbelievable performance. Cody Garbrandt when he beat Dominic Cruz. They stand out to me as two sort of virtuoso performances. And they're at lighter weight classes. Khamzat Chimaev against Dricus Du Plessis. Great performance from Khamzat. Could it have been more exciting? 100%. Yes, it could have been more exciting. And some of the fans in Chicago, though, the bloodlust in the stands in Chicago was very real because of what happened earlier in the night. We'll get onto that in a sec. But Chimaev was just a different kind of MMA to what we saw in the fights that led him. But nonetheless, brilliant performance from Khamzat Chimaev. And as I tweeted on the night, he is going to take some shifting at the top of that 185-pound division. He is the problem that now needs to be solved by everybody in the UFC middleweight division. And it's over to the top contenders. Who's got what it takes to unseat that man? Looking forward to finding out as we head through 2025 and maybe into 2026 as well. Khamzat Chimaev is your new UFC undisputed middleweight champion of the world. All right, let's take a look at the co-main event of the evening. And what a performance by Lerone the Miracle Murphy. England's own Lerone Murphy, Manchester's own Lerone Murphy, undefeated heading into the fight. I think he was 15-0-1 heading into that fight, or 16-0-1 heading into that fight with Aaron Pico. Aaron Pico, ever since he turned professional as an MMA fighter, immediately has had hype on him. His collegiate wrestling career was outstanding. So much so that Daniel Cormier, even this week, was saying that if Pico had stuck with his collegiate wrestling and hadn't transitioned to MMA as early as he did, he'd probably be an Olympic champion right now. That's how highly Daniel Cormier, former Team USA captain at the Olympics, that's how highly he rated Aaron Pico's wrestling. So Pico transitions to MMA, gets immediately hyped as the hottest prospect in mixed martial arts, immediately loses his professional debut in Bellator, gets thrown to the lions a little bit too quickly, loses a few fights, then they take a break, slow play him, start to treat his career the way you should, started to build up some confidence and really got some momentum towards the end of his Bellator run. Bellator then is snapped up by the PFL. Everything that happened with that, a lot of the big name fighters from the PFL, from Bellator, either weren't getting the fights that they felt they should have been getting, and they just wanted to leave. And Pico was one of those. Eventually had to go public. He's not the sort of person to do this, but he felt like he needed to. Eventually got his unconditional release from the PFL, joins the UFC. Cue more hype. This is a guy who, if you were putting together like the poster boy for mixed martial arts, he's got almost every box ticked. He's super respectful. He's got a little bit of swagger and confidence to him without it being too over the top. He's what I would call corporate friendly. He's not controversial. He rocks up in the suits, looks like $1 million. He's got the collegiate background, elite level collegiate background at that. And he's got a highlight reel as well. I mean, other than the fact he's got outstanding wrestling, his ability to stand in the pocket and land some vicious striking combinations has led to some great knockouts in his Bellator career as well. And people thought stylistically he would be perfect to step in to the UFC featherweight division and become an instant contender. So much so that on his UFC debut, despite the fact he hadn't fought for a year and a half, he was the betting favourite against Lerone Murphy, who is undefeated, fighting the best in the world in the UFC, which I found incredible. I'll be honest. I like Aaron Pico. I think he's a good fighter. Did I think he was on Lerone Murphy's level? I didn't. And the thing that I found with Aaron Pico was Aaron Pico is very, very good in one direction, which is when he's going forwards. But he is fallible. He is susceptible to getting clipped. We've seen it in fights in the past. And while you could tighten your defenses up a little bit, if you've got a problem with punch resistance and getting hit by big shots, even if you've got a good defense, that problem is still there. You're just trying to mitigate it with defense. And Aaron Pico, his defense isn't the best. Especially throw into the fact that it's his UFC debut. He's super, super keen to impress. He was already talking about what he could potentially do with Volkanovski if they fought in a title fight. He hasn't fought in the UFC yet, but that conversation was already happening in the lead up to the fight. Lerone Murphy, who is not a big talker, he's not a trash talker, but when he says stuff, he says what he means, and he's very definitive in what he says. I felt like he was being overlooked a little bit. I thought some of the media coverage was a little bit Pico, and oh, by the way, here's Lerone Murphy. And I thought that was a little disrespectful to Lerone Murphy, to be honest. I think, this is an undefeated fighter. He's proven his worth. He's not an undefeated fighter who's just been dropped into the UFC. Let's see how he goes. He's been in the UFC for years, and the only minor blemish on his record was a split draw, which was an absolute abomination of a decision. He won the fight, as far as I was concerned, against Zubaira Tukhugov. That fight was his UFC debut, and I thought he was robbed of a decision win that day. So, in my eyes, he's completely perfect at 16-0 or wherever it was, heading into that fight. But going in against Aaron Pico, what we saw was a fighter who was really, really keen to impress and really keen to make a statement. But the person who made the statement was the other guy. Lerone Murphy let the fight come to him. He knew it was coming. He was ready for the charge. Defended well. He was under a lot of pressure early. Pico really pushed the pace on him. But the thing with Murphy, and go back and watch the fight, he picked up Aaron Pico's timing and openings so quickly. Bear in mind, this fight only lasted 3 minutes, 21 seconds before Murphy knocked him out viciously with that incredible spinning back elbow. But the fight only lasted 3 minutes, 21 seconds. In that time, Murphy was able to spot the openings, get the cadence, get the timing of Pico, and was catching him repeatedly. He hit him with a perfect counter left. He hit him with a perfect knee. And both times he rocked Pico, and he knew this. Pico was pushing the pace throughout, but eventually he got caught, and he got caught in a major way. Murphy saw Pico coming in, unleashed that incredible spinning back elbow, and absolutely flatlined Aaron Pico. Now, Pico, from an athletic standpoint, is one of the best athletes in that featherweight division. But Lerone Murphy is one of the best fighters in that featherweight division. And I think what we saw was a talented athlete versus an elite fighter. And I think that's not to diminish Pico's abilities. I think he's very, very good in many areas. But Murphy was just a cut above. And the thing was, Murphy has never had the hype. He's never had it because he doesn't fit the mold of someone who gets hype. He's not a big talker. He doesn't run around throwing crazy spinning shit all the time. He did on Saturday night, but he fights in a very controlled manner. He's game manages, if you want to put it in sort of NFL parlance. He game manages his fights very well. His fight IQ is as high as anybody in the featherweight division, and the way that him and his Manchester top team crew prepared for Pico. Shouts to Carl Prince. He's finally starting to get some flowers, his coach Carl. He's one of the most underrated coaches in world MMA. He really is. The stuff he's doing at Manchester top team really deserves some more plaudits than he's getting. He's obviously got Lerone Murphy. He's got Lewis McGrillen in the PFL, who is an absolute wild man. But he's starting to shave some of those edges, those rough edges off, and has turned him into an absolute monster. And he's turning him into an absolute monster. Lewis Lee Scott is fighting on the Contender Series this week, and you've got a Tabor Gaultier, who is one of the most scary newcomers in the UFC, fighting at light heavyweight. So doing amazing things. A shouts to the big slow Luke Barnett, who was also in the corner. He's a mainstay at MTT as well. they're doing great things up there, and Murphy is the guy at the top of the tree right now. He's doing incredible things and has been for a while. Finally, he's getting his flowers, and I'm so pleased to see it, because the featherweight division is one of the most talent-stacked divisions in the UFC, and he hasn't necessarily been getting the finishes that he would have liked. He's winning the fights, he's beating everybody, but he hasn't necessarily had those finishes. And I tweeted on the night, if there was one area where if anybody wanted to level any kind of criticism at Lerone Murphy, despite his record, despite the people he's beaten, the only criticism you could possibly make is that he could do with some finishes against top names. He could do it a real moment, a highlight reel moment, to really help push his claims for a title fight. Well, he got that on Saturday night. Unbelievable performance. KO's Aaron Pico, 3-2-1 on the clock, and it was amazing to see. Brilliant spinning back elbow knockout from Lerone Murphy. And then the last thing he needed to do, which is something that we haven't seen a lot of on the microphone from him, he needed to make some noise. He needed to make sure that the world knew that he should be next for the 145-pound title, that he deserves the next shot at Alexander Volkanovski. And credit to him, that's exactly what he did. He didn't come across as fake. He didn't look like he'd prepared anything. It was just from the heart, straight off the cuff, said it how it was, and it got the response it deserved. Volkanovski took to social media and tweeted to Lerone Murphy and said, basically, congrats, I'll see you in December. I think, to quote a phrase, real recognize real, and Volkanovski knows that Lerone Murphy is certainly deserving of a shot at his title, and I think that's going to be a fascinating matchup. Really will be, because probably the two guys in the division with the highest fight IQ going head to head should be a fascinating contest, if indeed that fight gets booked. Fingers crossed it does. I think when you're unbeaten and you've been through the murderer's row of names that you've already been through, and then you get a highlight reel knockout against one of the most hyped rivals in the division, there's not really too much else that you should be asking Lerone Murphy to do to earn a title shot. I think he deserved that now. So fingers crossed he gets it in December. I think December will work for him. He said, that's perfect. Gives him time to take a short break and then get back into camp again. Book it. Let's have it. Lerone Murphy challenging Alexander Volkanovski for the featherweight belt in December. I'm in. Let's see that happen. But great performance for Lerone Murphy, who he really deserved that. And it's great to see from a personal point of view as an Englishman. Great to see another British fighter doing the business on the big stage and moving themselves into championship contention. Lerone Murphy is the real deal at 145 pounds. Let's get that man in a title fight. Lerone Murphy's spinning back elbow KO was something pretty special, and it followed an equally special spinning back elbow from Carlos Praches, the Fighting Nerds welterweight contender who was coming off a defeat. He'd knocked out everybody he'd faced in the UFC. Then he ran into Ian Machado Gary, who was just a little bit too smart, a little bit too clever, and was able to outpoint Praches. Although he got hurt late on, did Ian? But he managed to get through the 3 rounds and outpointed Carlos Praches. And Praches was handed a really tough assignment as he looked to bounce back. Jeff Hands of Steel Neal, knockout artist, a guy who on his day has the ability to flatline anybody at 170 pounds. This was one of those fights. I did a few betting tips leading into this weekend, and I'll be honest, I did not get them all right. I picked Du Plessis to defeat Chimaev by decision or by late stoppage. Got that one wrong. But one of my tips that I did get absolutely bang on was Praches versus Jeff Neal. I thought this was a fight that potentially could go either way, right? They're two heavy-handed strikers, either one of them capable of knocking out the other. So siding with one over the other was always a bit risky, but the one thing that was a no-risk bet as far as I could see was that this fight was not going to go to the judges. I bet on the fight to end by knockout or TKO. That's exactly what we got. Carlos Praches, stunning finish, spinning back elbow with 1 second left in the first round. Unbelievable stuff. Brilliant performance. And Carlos Praches, who other than being famous for being from the Fighting Nerds and having this incredible style, is also kind of infamous, if you like, for being someone who still smokes. You don't see much of that for obvious reasons. It's not ideal for your cardio if you're on the old cancer sticks, but there you go. Carlos Prates likes a cigarette every now and again, and he even rocked up to his post-fight press conference with a cigarette on the go. So it's become his thing, I suppose. He's got his little motif going on. But great performance from Carlos Prates. I actually got to meet Carlos during International Fight Week, and a cooler, more laid-back, respectful guy you couldn't wish to meet. Honestly, just a super cool character, and really enjoyed my conversation with him during International Fight Week. And the way he produced that finish against Jeff Neal. Prates is ready to be challenging the best guys at 170 now. So, and he called for a fight in Rio. Sounds like he's going to get it. He called for a bonus. And he did get that. He also called for his teammate, or I think it's the LFA flyweight champion, to get a chance in the UFC. So will he get 3 for 3? Will the UFC give him a shot? We will see how that one pans out. But yeah, amazing performance from Carlos Prates. Gets the first round knockout over Jeff Neal. 4 minutes 59 buzzer beater stuff, and would undeniably have been the knockout of the night had it not been arguably bettered by Lerone Murphy. 2 brilliant spinning back elbows. Take your pick which one you prefer, but they were both out of the top drawer. You don't see many spinning back elbow knockouts, but like London buses, we saw 2 in successive fights. We were very much spoiled at UFC 319 thanks to Carlos Prates and Lerone Murphy. But yeah, Carlos back in the win column. And on a good night for the Fighting Nerds, he's back in the mix at 170 pounds. Also on the main card, we saw Michael Venom Page back at middleweight again. He made that busman's holiday up to 185 pounds to take on Shara Bullet Magomedov earlier in the year, putting a great performance to outpoint him. And I think we all just assumed that he was going back down to 170. He'd get a contender fight and maybe try and work his way into title contention, because he was listed 15th in the welterweight division. But when you're listed 15th in the welterweight division and you got the sort of fighting style that Michael Venom Page has got, no one's going to want to fight you. No one above you in the rankings is going to want to fight you, because he's a nightmare to prepare for. Trying to mirror that guy's style is next to impossible. 2, he's a nightmare to face on fight night. He just makes you look like an idiot half the time. He's gone in there with elite level fighters and made them look silly. And number 3, there's a very good chance you're going to lose to him, because his style is just so difficult to deal with. His ability to cover distance and land good strikes. He's got that ability to just, whether it's by decision or whether it's by a highlight reel knockout, he could beat most, if not everybody, at 170 pounds. So there's any fight with MVP for anybody with a number next to their name is a fight with almost no upside, because he was at the bottom of the rankings. It's not that, okay, I'll beat him and I'll move up the rankings. You won't, because he was ranked last on the rankings list. He's 15th. So no benefit to anybody else ranked above him. The only way you're going to get any kind of movement is if Page gets ranked further up, and then maybe there's some sort of opportunity there. But then he's having to fight down the rankings probably, because same reason, no one above is going to want him. So he couldn't get a fight at 170 pounds. So he said, you know what, I'll fight at 185 then. If you can get me a good fight at 185. And the UFC came back with Jared Cannonier, former title challenger Jared Cannonier, coming back after one of, if not his best performance in the UFC, to defeat Gregory Rodriguez. That was a super, super impressive performance from the killer gorilla, Jared Cannonier. This was a real test for Michael Page. At 185 pounds, how would he look this time around against a super well-rounded fighter who's been in there with the best in a division, a man who used to fight at heavyweight, a man who used to fight at light heavyweight, and a man who does not get finished easily. And how would MVP look against someone super dangerous like that? And the answer was, you look pretty flipping good. Michael Venom Page, first 2 rounds looked like $1 million. The thing with MVP at 185 pounds is the speed discrepancy between him and his opponents is even more marked than it is at welterweight, because he's fighting guys that are a little bit bigger, a little bit heavier, and in most cases, just a tad slower. MVP has carried the speed up with him, and that meant that someone like Cannonier just could not find an answer to MVP in the first 2 rounds. And MVP dropped him in both of the first 2 rounds. First one was a brilliant single shot, just jump in, huge right hand, dropped him. Second one was arguably more impressive. It was like a 2 or 3 punch combo. He just got him, pow, dropped him, and then back out again. And honestly, brilliant. The first 2 rounds were almost perfection from Michael Venom Page. Cannonier could barely get a glove on him. Third round, I thought MVP maybe was looking to push for the finish just a little bit too much. Probably confident with how things were going after the first 2 rounds. Overextended just a little bit. Ended up slipping and being down on the mat. Cannonier, being as sharp as attack as he is, reacted immediately, got himself into top position, and proceeded to try and produce a late rally to try and finish the fight in the third round. Page defended very well. Page gets criticised sometimes for not having a ground game or for not having necessarily the ability to get up. He had the ability to get up in the first round when he got taken down briefly by Cannonier. He was able to get back up then. In the third round, he was kind of stuck on the bottom, but he showed some decent defensive skills to make sure that, much like DDP in the main event, that while he was on his back and he was being dominated from a positional standpoint, Cannonier wasn't able to get a huge amount of offense off. There was a moment where he looked like he was working towards a Kimura, I think it was, but Page managed to get himself out of trouble there. There was a moment where Cannonier looked like he was maneuvering himself for an arm triangle choke. Again, MVP managed to defend and get himself out of trouble there as well. Other than a few ground strikes, but nothing too life-threatening from a result standpoint. Page did well to nullify Cannonier on the mat, and by the time the fight got to the judges' scorecards, it was a very, very easy fight to score. I mean, you wouldn't have to be an MMA expert to score that fight 29-28, and all 3 judges scored the fight 29-28, and Michael Venom Page picks up his second successive win at 185 pounds. Interestingly, he's now been removed from the welterweight rankings and he's now being considered for the middleweight rankings. And honestly, if no one's going to fight MVP at 170 pounds, then I think this is the right move for him. I think he can now focus on adding a little bit more bulk to that frame without losing any of his speed. That's going to be the crucial factor for him. But if he can add just a smidge more power to that frame, he's going to be an absolute monster at 185 pounds. He towered over Jared Cannonier in that fight. And Cannonier, as I say, he's fought heavyweight, light heavyweight, middleweight. MVP's a welterweight moving up. He was the bigger guy. And in the clinch, there's some clinch work up against the cage. MVP more than held his own against Cannonier in those exchanges. So a lot of people thought that Cannonier, who is very strong at the weight class, would be able to sort of bully MVP in the clinch, and he really didn't. So that was super impressive to see, and I think it offers real promise for the future for MVP. Maybe, and I did the UFC.com feature on MVP pre-fight, and I think that, like, the path to a title has always looked to be at 170 pounds. That's been MVP's division forever, right? But maybe his best path to the gold and a shot at championship glory lies at 185 pounds. He's now 2-0 as a UFC middleweight. He's beaten a dangerous knockout artist in Shara Bullet, and he's just beaten a former title challenger in Jared Cannonier. Who does he fight next? There are options at middleweight. Obviously, we got all the top contenders vying to face Khamzat for the belt. Who wouldn't want to see, and I know this is not likely to happen because they're good buddies, but who wouldn't want to see MVP versus Israel Adesanya, for example? Who wouldn't want to see that fight? That would be mental. So that's just one example. There are other fights out there. You could put him in with pretty much anybody in that weight class, and it would be a fascinating matchup just because MVP's style is so different to everybody else in the weight division. But maybe middleweight's the route for him. So we'll see how it goes. But another good performance from MVP. Didn't get the finish, but he's entertaining the fans. He got the knockdowns. He produced some good stuff. And I think the only way is up for MVP at 185 pounds. We'll see where he goes next. He offered to fight Carlos Praches in Rio, actually. In the post-fight press conference, Praches wanted to fight. Announced in the cage, Prachias said he wanted to fight Leon Edwards in Rio. MVP threw his hat into the ring to fight Prachias in Rio. I think this is MVP's sort of bid to get back into the welterweight division and immediately put himself into contention, which is smart in that regard. If I'm Carlos Prachias, I'm not taking that fight, by the way. I think I'd rather have someone a little bit more orthodox to deal with. Prachias versus MVP would be dynamite, though. It really would. So if they book that fight, I'm not going to be hating on that at all. That would be an incredible fight for Rio. But I'd like to see MVP stick around at 185. I really do. I think there's some mileage in that. So we'll see how it all goes. The good thing is, it would appear that from finding himself in a weight class where no one wants to fight him, MVP now is a man with some options. And if you're a UFC matchmaker, that's a very good person to have, right? If a good fight comes up at 170, MVP will take it. If there's a decent fight to be made at 185, MVP will take it. And you know that when MVP shows up, he brings the show. So all good news for Michael Venom Page. Gets the victory over Jared Cannonier in impressive fashion. Let's see what happens next in the career of the one and only MVP. All right, and the very first fight of the main card was the fight that probably had the least fanfare of all of the fights on the main card for obvious reasons, but it produced an amazing fight and a great result. Tim Elliott, former title challenger, taking on another former title challenger, Kai Asakura. Asakura, former rising champion, came into the UFC immediately given a shot at the flyweight title. Asakura, having been the champion in rising at bantamweight, don't forget, coming in as a flyweight, took on Alexander Pantoja, was beaten by Alexander Pantoja. This was supposed to be his bounce-back fight against Tim Elliott, a gritty veteran of the scene who has been in the UFC flyweight division forever, has a very unusual style, but is someone who's going to make you work. But he's also not someone who's going to be very difficult to find in the cage. So I think if you were looking at that fight leading in, you think that, okay, Asakura is not going to have a problem hitting this guy because he's always there. He's a pressure fighter, is Tim Elliott. He has a strange herky-jerky kind of style, but he's in your face. So, but the way the fight panned out, Asakura was hitting him with some good stuff. None of it was hurting Tim Elliott. It was remarkable to see. Elliott, despite being very much in the veteran stage in his career, was able to basically walk through anything Asakura threw at him. And then when he got his hands on Asakura and got him down, then he was in Tim Elliott's world. And second round, guillotine choke submission. Tim Elliott, the biggest underdog on the main card, gets the win, completely destroys everybody's parlays for fight night. Asakura was a big favourite heading into that fight. Elliott gets the win. Amazing performance from him. And I think he said that was the last fight on his contract. So fingers crossed he gets a new contract, because he always brings the action. He always brings good fights, and he got the job done. Tim Elliott gets the victory over Kai Asakura, and the main card of UFC 319 kicked off with a great performance and an impressive upset win for Tim Elliott. That was your main card at UFC 319. Absolutely brilliant stuff from top to tail. Just the one decision on that main card, and that was in a really interesting fight. Michael Venom Page getting the victory over Jared Cannonier. Let's quickly run you down the other results just to wrap things up on the UFC 319 card. In the middleweight division, the featured prelim, Baisengo Susakayev defeating Eric Nolan. Interesting fight this for a couple of reasons. Number one was Susakayev, who only earned his UFC contract on Tuesday. That's mental. He earned his UFC contract on Dana White's Contender Series, a fight that he took on short notice on Tuesday, gets a fight in the UFC on the Saturday, defeats Eric Nolan by second round rear naked choke submission. Amazing story. Shouts to Eric Nolan, former US Marine, former Cage Fury Fighting Championships welterweight champion, who agreed to take the fight on short notice, a weight class up, and gave Susakayev all he could handle in the first round. Susakayev was grinning away, looked like he was and not a care in the world, and thought he was going to have it all his own way. And then Nolan started to bite down on his mouthpiece and throw some hard shots. And he was that close to getting Sirsakiyev out of there, had him on skates, and maybe if there's another 10, 15 seconds left in that first round, he might well have stopped him at the end of that first round. Nolan really did put it on him in the closing moments of that opening 5 minutes. But Sirsakiyev got to the end of the round, came out for round 2, and got the job done by rear naked choke submission. He wants to fight next week. He's a protege of and training partner of Khamzat Chimaev, and I think he wants to kind of do some of those similar things that Chimaev did earlier on in his career, where making quick turnarounds, making a name for himself. He's the only thing he got wrong was he was trying to lead the crowd in a chant of his name, which they weren't into at all. And they completely left him hanging. It was a little bit embarrassing, really, but nothing embarrassing about the performance. Great stuff from Baysenga Sirsakiyev, and he's the sort of fighter that Dana White and the UFC will absolutely love, because I think he just wants to fight. He just wants to get in there. He'll take on anybody. He's clearly super confident. He's come through the Contender Series, so he's got that little badge of honor as well. I don't think we're going to be waiting too long before we see Baysenga Sirsakiyev back in the octagon. Shouts to Eric Nolan, though, and I was very pleased to hear Dana White giving Eric Nolan his props in the post-fight press conference as well. He takes two to make a decent fight, and he certainly played his part. As I say, and he wasn't that far of winning that fight in the first round as well. So fingers crossed they get him fighting back at his natural weight class, where I think he could do something. You know, I don't know whether he'll make it all the way to championship contention, but he's got the fighting style, he's got that grit, and he's got the ability to sleep people with his punches. That I think he's going to be a fun fighter to watch at 170 pounds. They can make some fun matchups with him. So that is Eric Nighttime Nolan, great nickname as well. We'll see him hopefully at 170 next time out. As for Baysenga Sirsakiyev, definitely one to watch at 185 pounds. That was your featured prelim. Also on the prelims, Mikhail Alexichuk versus Gerald Meerschaert. I mentioned in the preview last week, Alexichuk loves a body shot. He really does. He rips the left hand to the body, and against a southpaw like Meerschaert, a southpaw who's not a natural striker, that shot was open for him all day long, and he hurt Meerschaert with one early in that first round, and that really took the wind out of Meerschaert's sails. And then eventually Alexichuk swarmed him and finished him off with strikes, having hurt him to the head, and really went at him. 3 minutes, 3 seconds was all it took for Poland's Mikhail Alexichuk. But this is a new Mikhail Alexichuk who is now training as part of the Fighting Nerds, a Polish middleweight fighting in Sao Paulo, Brazil, or training in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and donning the famous Fighting Nerds glasses as a proud representative of that team. And he looks to be really coming into his own now at 185 pounds. That was super impressive. I've always liked Alexichuk as a fighter, and I think now fighting or training with the Fighting Nerds, I think, and getting the looks that he's going to get from people like Caio Borralho, and, you know, maybe picking up some extra striking wrinkles from the likes of Mauricio Ruffi and Carlos Praches. He's going to be someone to watch at 185 pounds. He's always had the natural talent, I think. Just putting all these tools together, I think he's got a really good chance as part of that Fighting Nerds team. Great performance from Mikhail Alexichuk. Also on the prelims, Lupi Godinez out battling Jessica Andrade, a unanimous decision 29-28 across the board, and a huge win for Alexander Hernandez, who stops Chase Hooper with 2 seconds left in the first round in the opening televised prelim. All the talk going into this fight was about Chase Hooper, who has looked great. He's looked great since moving up to lightweight. We've seen him sort of grow up in the octagon. When he was basically a kid when he started in the UFC, some sort of skinny, scrawny kid fighting at featherweight. He's now up at lightweight, starting to look really good. Alexander Hernandez went in there and just put a performance on. Just great stuff. Was waiting his moment, very patient. Hernandez in the past has maybe not been that patient in his fights, and has sometimes fought his way into trouble, and has ended up losing because of it. This time, super disciplined, waited his moment, was obviously looking for a particular opening, got it, landed a huge shot, and finished Chase Hooper with 2 seconds left on the clock in the first round. Huge and impressive win for the great ape Alexander Hernandez. We had 3 fights on the early prelims as well. Dricus Close defeating Edson Barboza. That was another one of my tips that went south. I thought Barboza would get the stoppage in that fight. Close did a really good job on him, hurt him quite badly in the second round. It looked like he was going to get him out of there in the second round at one point, hitting him with some nasty stuff in the clinch. Barboza, for the first time really, in his fights, I would say, starting to look his age just a little bit. Closer really put the pressure on him, and we didn't get the same snap from Barboza that we often get. So I don't know whether we had a difficult weight cut or there were other factors, but it just looked to me like he wasn't quite as fast twitch and as sort of snappy as we used to seeing from him. So we'll see what happens with Edson Barboza next. Great win for Dricus Close. Also a good win for Karine Silva. She continues her move up the women's flyweight division. She defeats Lerone Barbosa. Unanimous decision, 29-28 across the board for Karine Silva. And kicking off the night was the final of the flyweight tournament in the Ultimate Fighter 33. Joseph Morales getting the second round submission victory over Alibi Adiris via second round triangle choke submission. Good performance to kick off the night. Great night of fights top to tail. The bonuses, we did not have a fight of the night. What we had were 4 performances of the night bonuses. Khamzat Chimaev got a bonus. Lerone Murphy, Carlos Praches, unsurprisingly, and Tim Elliott. That was a great fight card. That really was a great fight card. UFC 319, we said it leading in, only 1 title fight on that card. But it didn't matter. It did not matter. What it meant was it was quite a fast-paced card as well, because we had those 2 first-round knockouts in the main card. It really did whiz along, that main card. It was great, and I thought one of the more entertaining UFC nights of 2025 for sure, and looking forward to what's coming down the line later this year. But that was UFC 319. Hope you enjoyed the fights on Saturday night. Also need to shout out Alfie Davis. The PFL World Tournament took place the night before on the Friday night. The main event was Gadzi Rabadanov versus Alfie Davis. Alfie Davis, with some odds makers, was as big as a 10-1 underdog in a 2-horse race. The disrespect. But anyway, Alfie Davis went in there and put on a brilliant performance. Absolutely brilliant performance to win the fight. 48-47, I think it was, across the board. Deservedly so. Gadzi Rabadanov, the PFL lightweight champion from 2024. That was in the old season format. We're now in an elimination tournament format. And Rabadanov was very respectful of Alfie Davis's striking. I think he was wary of getting caught and wary of getting clipped, and rightly so. And I think that took away from his game a little bit. It allowed Alfie Davis to really do what he does best. And Alfie controlled the range well. He fought most of the fight off the back foot because Gadzi Rabadanov constantly trying to apply controlled pressure. But Alfie Davis, brilliant display from him, fighting off the back foot. Brilliant counter striking performance. Excellent takedown defense. He did get taken down a couple of times, but again, it's what you do when you've been taken down, and he shut down Rabadanov. You know, he was never in any major trouble when he got taken down. And when the fight was in a stand-up, only one person was really scoring with consistent shots, and it was the Axeman, Alfie Davis, who I've been covering him since his Bellator days when he was sort of on the way up. He was fighting out of London Shoot Fighters back then. Now he's fighting for under the Great Britain top team banner. He's got Brad Pickett and Ash Grimshaw in his corner, and you know, I think that move, having spent a long time with one team, sometimes a change can help get extra things out of your game, and I think we've seen Alfie level up. That's not a disrespect to the London Shoot Fighters guys, who are one of the most respected gyms in the country. Sometimes you just need a change. Sometimes you need a different voice in your ear, or a slightly different approach to training, or a different emphasis. And what we have now is Alfie Davis fighting better than we've ever seen. He beat Clay Collard in the first round of the tournament in a fight that he was a huge underdog for. He then beat former Bellator lightweight champion Brent Primus in the semi-finals in a fight that he was a huge underdog for. Then he goes into the final against Gadzi Rabadanov in a fight that Rabadanov was such a huge favourite to win. And Alfie Davis goes out there and puts on a brilliant performance. He is the PFL 2025 lightweight tournament winner and $500,000 better off as a result. Huge respect to him. Credit to him. Another champion for the UK mixed martial arts community to celebrate. And I hope he gets his flowers. He's a good guy, is Alfie Davis, and he's been working hard on the scene in Bellator. Got into the PFL and did it the hard way. There weren't any politics to stop him from moving up. No matchmaking wrinkles to stop him going up. He goes in there. He won the fights. He beat 3 world-class championship-level fighters. Every single one of them he beat. He is a deserving champion. And he brings home a championship belt and a cool $500,000. So, great job, Alfie the Axeman Davis. All right, that's just about all we've got time for on this edition of the RDX Sports Podcast. That was a mad weekend of fights. My body clock is an absolute mess. I stayed up all night for the PFL. Then I did the same again for the UFC. So right now, my body has no idea what time it is. I'm a bit of a mess, but I'm happy. We had a great night on Friday night where we saw a Brit become a champion. We had a great night on Saturday night where we saw a Brit make it to championship level with the best performance of his career. And a huge card of great fights over there in Chicago. Shouts to Liz Carmouche as well, by the way, in the PFL, getting the job done and winning the flyweight title. The flyweight tournament title. She now wants to face Dakota Decheva, and I think that really is the only big fight that the PFL can make for Dakota right now. So I'd love to see that. Also great to hear Joe Rogan giving a shout out to Liz Carmouche on the UFC broadcast. Of course, these are rival organizations, and sometimes these rival organizations don't always like to talk about each other. Great to hear Joe Rogan giving Liz Carmouche a shout out. Of course, the first ever female fighter to set foot in the UFC octagon for that fight where she took on Ronda Rousey and had Ronda in trouble for a little while before she eventually got submitted. And we all know what happened after that. Ronda went absolutely supernova and exploded the sport of women's MMA into the mainstream. So, but none of that would have happened in the way that it did without Liz Carmouche as well. She has continued her career, and I think at the age of 41 now, she's still winning titles. She won the Bellator title, was it last year or the year before? Now she's the PFL World Tournament winner. So all credit to Liz Gorilla Carmouche, and looking forward to seeing her versus Dakota Decheva, maybe later this year, maybe early next year. Let's see how all that goes. But yeah, a packed weekend of mixed martial arts. Hope you enjoyed those fights. Don't forget, on the socials, you can follow me at Simon Head Sport across all social media platforms. You can follow RDX Sports at RDX Sports on X, at RDX_sports on Instagram. And don't forget, most importantly of all, give us a like, give us a subscribe right here on YouTube, and never miss an episode of the RDX Sports Podcast. We will be back next weekend? After next weekend for another edition of the show. Until then, enjoy the fights, enjoy the rest of this week, enjoy the fights coming up this weekend, and we'll talk to you again next week.